You may know a few Minion facts, but Minions and Monsters is packed with insane secrets that you don't want to miss. But you're in the right place, because we're going to talk about close to 36 of them. From Easter eggs relating to the previous movies, to how these yellow guys altered human history, and where Gru was hiding in this movie. You'd want to stay to the end, because we've got a secret that reveals the plot of the next Minions movie. The first secret I'm going to let you in on is this. Hit the subscribe button to find out. The secret is, I heard that Illumination is working on more movies for the Minions, so we're not going to run out of laughs from these guys. Now we're going to start this secret reveal fest by addressing the cyclops in the room. I seriously wonder how the Minions ended up with such a dumb creature. I guess when you're a giant and really scary, you get seen as evil, despite how clumsy you are. Now we all know that James is the sweet little cutie patootie of the group, and he's building marble Legos as a gift idea for the Cyclops. But this was really the first time anybody got to experience Lego, so the Cyclops was the first person to know just how badly they hurt. I always knew that stepping on them would hurt, but stepping on them and losing your life? That seems a bit harsh, doesn't it? I mean, imagine going to the monster afterlife and other monsters are talking about how they got slain by a brave hero or something, and all you get to tell them is how you kicked the bucket by stepping on some Legos. Embarrassing. Here's the secret that even the movie doesn't want you to know. This could have all been prevented. This dude didn't have to go. In the background here, you'll see two minions carrying a giant sandal, which obviously would have belonged to the Cyclops. Only if the one-eyed monster had been eager to put on some slippers rather than playing with some Lego, maybe he wouldn't have gone out so sadly or so pathetically. Just when it looks like the Cyclops couldn't have had a worse day, the movie quietly hides another detail that most viewers probably never noticed. After surviving his disastrous fall, the giant boss is shown completely wrapped in casts from all the injuries he suffered during the accident. It's a quick scene, so most people are focused on his condition rather than the little details scattered across the bandages. But if you pause and look closely at the cast on his arm, you'll spot a small message written across it. One of the minions had scribbled the word Pori. To most viewers, it probably looks like random gibberish. However, longtime Minions fans know that's actually one of the words from the Minions' own quirky language. Pori is their way of saying sorry, making it a surprisingly wholesome detail hidden in the scene. Instead of simply moving on after accidentally causing their boss's near-fatal fall, the Minions quietly leave behind a heartfelt apology on his cast. It's a tiny Easter egg that perfectly captures their innocent personalities. Even after creating absolute chaos, they still feel bad about what happened and try to make things right in the sweetest way they know how. You probably didn't notice this tiny background detail during the Minions' journey across the ocean after they were banished from the Cyclops village. Having lost yet another boss, they set off in search of a new place to call home, sailing across the sea with no idea what awaited them next. While most viewers are focused on the Minions, the background quietly delivers a funny visual gag. If you look closely, you'll spot a rather grumpy-looking crab resting nearby. At first, it doesn't seem like anything special, but as soon as the Minions got closer, the crab quickly retreats and hides instead of sticking around to see what happens. It's a hilarious little piece of visual storytelling. The Minions have already built quite a reputation for accidentally turning simple situations into complete disasters. They've managed to injure their own boss, destroy countless things without meaning to, and leave chaos everywhere they go. Just like the last two movies, the Minions spend the early parts of the movie looking for a master. We're barely a third of the way into the movie, but we already have a deceased emperor, pirate, cyclops, royal, and wizard. That's really as many bodies as the last few movies. If you really are a Minions freak, you'd know that they probably just met their old masters without them even knowing. Quite a small world, isn't it? They are elated as the ancient ruler slowly awakens. The scene is packed with Egyptian-inspired details, but here is an ancient secret that you wouldn't even notice even if you were Indiana Jones. When the mummy pushes open the lid of the sarcophagus, the inside briefly reveals a symbol of Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god associated with mummification and guiding the dead into the afterlife. It's only visible for a moment, making it incredibly easy to miss during normal playback. The detail actually makes perfect sense, since Anubis was closely connected with mummies and burial rituals in Egyptian mythology. Placing his symbol inside the sarcophagus is a clever touch by the animators. It adds a small layer of authenticity to the scene while quietly paying tribute to one of ancient Egypt's most recognizable deities. At one point, you just have to remind yourself that it is supposed to be a movie about a minion following his dreams of being a movie director and not a timepiece for archaeological students in college. But there's quite a lot of historically accurate details here that you just have to applaud the animators for including. Okay, now the scene where we saw the fried egg joke in the desert part was pretty hilarious, I'm not gonna lie. But how did we go from the minions wandering the desert for a new master to a perfect recipe for a nice breakfast? While wandering through the desert in search of a new boss, tensions begin to rise among the minions. Dick starts picking on Henry and James until Henry finally loses his patience and charges after him. Ed quickly jumps in to separate them, but instead of calming things down, he surprisingly ends up punching Dick himself. Within seconds, the entire group is caught up in a big brawl. During all the commotion, Dick crashes into another minion who had been peacefully frying an egg. The impact sends everything flying, and for a brief moment, it's one of those moments that blends perfectly into all the chaos happening around it. Before Dick bumps into him, the minion is clearly cooking one egg. Yet immediately afterward, he somehow ends up with 2 fried eggs stuck to his goggles. So where did the second egg come from? Somewhere in the middle of all that punching and shoving, an extra fried egg mysteriously joins the scene. I don't even want to believe that these guys had omelet ingredients packed in their bag or something. Okay, let's actually stop and think about this for a second. That toddler-sized Cthulhu-looking thing is named Goome. Except Goome turns out to be short for Gary Orcam Oliver Magma Ichabod. Bro's government name alone needs its own credit scene. Now be honest with me, does anyone walk around with nearly 5 names stitched together if there's no family behind them? Seriously, humor me here and answer this one honestly. Goome is clearly the youngest in his bloodline, which means somewhere out there he's got older siblings and maybe even parents or an uncle or two. Imagine being the middle child in a family of eldritch horrors. This franchise has always leaned hard into the whole family thing, so a follow-up where Goome's entire clan shows up looking for payback genuinely tracks. He already wrecked enough as a solo act. Now stack a full family reunion on top of that and pray for us all. Now picture an entire squad of Cthulhus running around. That is not a visual anyone should be signing up for. And if his relatives really do pull up in a future movie, let's hope the minions actually have a plan this time. Let's also be honest that this whole mess technically didn't have to happen if the minions had just paid attention during the exact moment that spell got cast and summoned Cthulhu into existence. Reading comprehension really was not in the minion job description. You could genuinely see how crushed they looked when he couldn't be the star of their movie. But credit where it's due. At least he hooked them up with a monster who could. Except here's the actual issue. These little guys heard the man casually tack on Deceiver to his own name and just let that slide? That's not subtle. That's basically a warning label. We get that Henry and Ed were desperate enough to cast literally any monster they could find, but come on, that's not an excuse. And sure enough, they got exactly what they signed up for. So genuinely, well played. The Minions' desert adventure is so packed with action that it's easy to totally miss what's happening in the background. Right in the middle of their big brawl, everything stops the second they spot what looks like a fearless bank robber galloping across the desert with a bag of stolen cash. They immediately forget whatever they were fighting about and just stare at him completely starstruck, convinced they finally found their next perfect boss. While everyone's watching the supposed outlaw, the background is quietly running another funny little bit. Pause it at the right second, and you'll catch one mischievous minion giving another a full wedgie. The classic underwear yank prank school bullies have been pulling forever. It happens so fast, it's nearly impossible to catch during a normal watch, especially with everyone locked on to the dramatic chase up front. It's a tiny visual gag that does absolutely nothing for the plot, but that's exactly why it's so funny. Illumination clearly stuffed this scene with little background jokes just for the attentive viewers to find. Remember when the minions had to go on the hunt for a new boss because the Cyclops was no more? Just like they did after they lost Napoleon, they set off on a journey. Really, what is it with these guys and thinking long trips will cure their depression? Now, you may not notice this at first, but as soon as the minions got closer, the crab quickly retreated and hid instead of sticking around to see what happens. Excuse me, Mr. Crustacean, you're safe. These minions don't look like they're going to turn you into their boss or anything. Maybe the crab wasn't taking any chances. It almost seems as though he recognized the walking trail of destruction heading his way and decided disappearing was the safest option. Considering everything the minions had already accidentally ruined, hiding was probably the smartest decision he could have made. Honestly, this movie has way too many details in the background for the type of things it'd be hiding in them. Right in the middle of their massive brawl, everything changes when they suddenly spot what appears to be a fearless bank robber galloping across the desert with a bag of stolen money. Completely forgetting their argument, the minions immediately stop fighting and stare at him in admiration, convinced they finally found the perfect new boss to serve. This is something that really takes your attention from any and everything, and it's easy to see why. Have you ever noticed this unusual background detail hiding in the middle of all the chaos? After being driven out of the Cyclops village, the minions spend years searching for a new evil master. Along the way, they briefly serve a long list of villains, including an old wizard, an Egyptian mummy, a pirate captain, a sleepy British nobleman, and even a powerful Chinese ruler. Unfortunately, their habit of accidentally eliminating every boss they work for leaves them wandering the desert once again without anyone to follow. As the frustrated minions begin arguing among themselves, one of them suddenly notices an outlaw fleeing on horseback while a sheriff and several deputies chase close behind. Seeing another potential villain to serve, the minions immediately spring into action and unintentionally hijack a runaway train. Before long, the train comes barreling through the Hollywood streets, ripping up the road and sending terrified pedestrians scrambling out of its path. If you pay close attention to the crowd, one background character stands out for an unexpected reason. Among the people fleeing the runaway train is a man wearing a woman's dress, who even lifts the skirt to run faster. While the moment is easy to miss, it's a curious historical detail, since seeing a man publicly dressed that way would have been extremely uncommon during the 1920s, making this one of the trailer's more surprising blink-and-you'll-miss-it moments. Life in the desert clearly isn't easy for the minions. After losing another evil master, they spend their days wandering across scorching sands, sleeping under the moon with nothing but rocks for pillows as they continue searching for a new boss. Tempers are already running high, so it doesn't take much for things to spiral out of control. The trouble begins when Dick, the grumpy minion with the missing tooth, starts picking on Henry and James. Henry finally has enough and charges straight at him, forcing Ed to step in and break up the argument. But instead of calming everyone down, Ed loses his own patience and ends up punching Dick himself. Within seconds, the disagreement erupts into a full brawl as minions begin shoving and crashing into one another from every direction. During the chaos, Dick stumbles backward and collides with another minion who had been quietly frying an egg. At first glance, it seems like a simple slapstick gag, but if you look closely, something doesn't quite add up. Before the collision, the pan contains just one single egg, yet the unlucky minion somehow has 2 fried eggs stuck to his goggles. Unless another egg magically appeared in the middle of the fight, this looks like a classic animation continuity mistake that's easy to miss while everyone is busy throwing punches. The minions' chaotic desert fight comes to an end the moment Dick spots what looks like the perfect new evil master, a bank robber galloping across the desert with a sack of stolen money while a sheriff and several deputies run after him. Without thinking twice, the minions abandon their argument, steal the lawmen's horses, and race after him. The chase quickly escalates into an even bigger spectacle when everyone ends up on a speeding train. As the robber makes his way toward the locomotive, the minions follow, determined not to let their future boss escape. Things get especially strange once they reach the front of the train. Henry leaps into the locomotive and lands directly on top of the train engineer. But if you slow the scene down, something impossible happens. A split second later, Henry somehow reaches down and pulls James up beside him, even though James was never shown entering the locomotive in the first place.
And that's not the only disappearing act. The train engineer, who was pinned down beneath Henry only moments earlier, completely vanishes from the scene. Even after the locomotive crashes apart, there's still no sign of him. Somehow, both James and the engineer seem to defy the laws of continuity, but in very different ways. As this sequence continues, another subtle mistake sneaks into the action. The Minions' wild train chase somehow manages to become even more chaotic once Henry and James reach the locomotive. Curious about all the controls, the pair begin pulling levers. At one point, Henry grabs the train's brake lever with all his strength, while he and James laugh at the loud whistle echoing through the city. Of course, leaving the controls in the hands of two excited minions turns out to be a terrible idea. Instead of staying on the tracks, the train barrels straight into the streets, weaving wildly from side to side. The sharp turns and constant swerving make it look like the entire train is seconds away from falling apart. But if you take a look behind the locomotive, there's another detail that doesn't quite make sense. Earlier, we're shown that the train is pulling several wagons loaded with many split logs. With the way the train is swerving wildly through the streets, you'd expect at least some of those logs to shift, roll over, or even come crashing off the wagons. But somehow, none of them do. They stay perfectly in place through every sharp turn and near miss, as if they're strapped down, even though they clearly aren't. Even after the entire chase comes to an end, the load still looks almost exactly the same. Either those logs have incredible balance, or they're secretly holding on tighter than the minions are. Here's a fun little background detail you probably didn't notice. The Bright brothers, the owners of the movie studio where the Minions begin their journey into the film industry, clearly have no shortage of confidence. Both brothers are on the chubbier side, and they seem to be incredibly proud of it. If you pay close attention to their office, you'll notice it's decorated with several statues modeled after themselves. The most noticeable ones are the large Greek-style sculptures standing directly behind their chairs, making it impossible to miss just how much they admire their own image. And those aren't the only tributes to themselves either. Similar statues can be spotted in other parts of the studio as well, almost as if they wanted everyone who walked through the building to be constantly reminded of who was in charge. It's a subtle visual gag that perfectly captures their larger-than-life egos and adds another layer of humor hiding in plain sight for attentive viewers. After the Minions get kicked out by the Bright brothers' pictures, James sits quietly by the window of their new hideout, an abandoned food factory, looking defeated. As he starts drawing, we get a glimpse of the sketchbook where he figured out what their next monster movie could look like. Most of the drawings make perfect sense. There's a sketch of his fellow minions, spooky-looking monsters, and even a storm cloud with lightning flashing through it. But if you look a little closer, one page contains something completely unexpected. Sitting right beside the cloud is a plate, a fork, a spoon, and a knife. It's such a random combination that it immediately stands out. What does a full set of cutlery have to do with monsters or making movies? Unless James suddenly got distracted thinking about his next meal halfway through drawing, those utensils seem completely out of place on the page. James's sketchbook actually hides a fun little callback that longtime Minions fans might recognize. After showing Dick the idea he has for their next movie, we get another closer look at the pages filled with James's drawings. At first, they just look like rough sketches of monsters and fellow minions. But tucked away among them is a tiny detail that's easy to miss.
One of the drawings shows a little yellow minion holding a brown teddy bear. That might not seem important at first, but it's actually a clear reference to Bob, one of the three main minions from the very first Minions movie. Bob was rarely seen without his beloved teddy bear, Tim, making him one of the franchise's most recognizable characters. It's a subtle little Easter egg that pays tribute to one of the franchise's most beloved minions. Unless you pause the trailer and look closely at James's sketchbook, there's a good chance you'll miss this fun little callback. Going back to the runaway train sequence, there's a pretty strange logic mistake if you pay close attention to the people waiting at the end of the alley. As the minions accidentally send the train charging through the streets, people scatter in every direction running, and the train keeps speeding toward what looks like an unavoidable crash. Just before it reaches the end of the alley, several characters are seen gathered in an attempt to stop the collision. At first, nothing seems unusual, but if you look a little closer, you'll spot a familiar face among them. Standing there is the very same sheriff whose horse the minion stole earlier while chasing the supposed bank robber. The last time we saw him, he'd been left behind on foot with his deputies after losing his horse. Yet, somehow, he still manages to arrive at the crash site in time. So, how exactly did he get that fast? Did he suddenly become the fastest man in town? Or did he discover a shortcut that even the speeding train didn't know about? Either way, it's a funny little logic slip that's easy to miss in the middle of all the chaos. After watching Dort accidentally knock out the four bullies, the minions immediately become convinced they found their next great boss. Minions really out here job hunting like it is 2009. As Dort introduces himself, the minions stand listening while we see a large wall covered with posters behind him. The way the scene is framed gives the impression that the group is standing in a fairly enclosed area, but then something changes almost instantly. The convention apparently has teleportation built in. As soon as Dort finishes speaking, he turns and leads the minions away. In the very next shot, they're suddenly walking along an open street lined with shops, parked cars, and street lamps. The problem is that the open street wasn't visible in the previous shot at all, making the transition feel oddly abrupt, as though the layout of the convention completely shifted between camera angles. Illumination's set designers really said, trust the process. James's sketchbook is packed with creative ideas for the Minions' next adventure, but one tiny drawing quietly pays tribute to a beloved character from the previous movies. As James excitedly shares his movie concept, the camera briefly lingers on the pages of his sketchbook, giving observant viewers a chance to spot a clever Easter egg hidden among all the doodles. James is doodling with his whole heart. If you look carefully, you'll notice a small minion hugging a brown teddy bear. It's a subtle detail that's easy to overlook, but longtime fans will immediately recognize who it's meant to represent. The drawing is a reference to Bob, the lovable minion from the first Minions film, who was almost never seen without his treasured teddy bear, Tim. Their friendship became one of the most memorable parts of the movie, making Bob instantly recognizable even in a tiny sketch like this. Tim the teddy bear truly did not get enough credit. It's nice to see that as much as we're getting a look at brand new Minion characters, we're also remembering the OGs we fell in love with before this movie came around. You have it. Close 3 dozen secrets that you most definitely missed in Minions. I'll catch you again in the next video. Leave a comment on what secret shocked you the most, and go check out our other videos.